Erere kau mai te awa nui, mai te kāhui manga ki Tangaroa, ko au te awa, ko te awa ko au. The great river flows from the mountain to the sea. I am the river and the river is me. Thank you for having me present and apologies for the mix-up last time. I'm going to start my presentation today by sharing a video first.
Ko tubua te kaua, ko tau i te kaua, ko te mātoi o te rangi tēnei rā te take. He runga mārua wa tū mā waka ke tia ki runga. Ko oru koe o ka tupuria he kawaura, he kawaura. In August 2014, Te Ati Haunui a Pāparangi signed a deed of settlement with the New Zealand government, which settled the long-standing claim our people have had over the Whanganui River for over a century and a half. The Whanganui River is the third longest river in New Zealand, at just over 300 kilometres in length. It drains approximately 7,000 square kilometres of geologically young and therefore erosion-prone hill country. The Whanganui rises on the western slopes of the Kāui Maunga, the mountains of the central volcanic plateau, where the headwaters have been tapped for the production of hydroelectricity via the Tongariro power scheme since the 1970s, something our people were not consulted over and continue to oppose. Beginning in the 1880s, laws were passed to force the physical removal of pātuna and utupiaro, eel and lamprey weirs, to allow for the passage of river steamers into the interior of the North Island. In doing so, the government embarked on a less than subtle program aimed at undermining the reliance on, and therefore relationship, that the Whanganui tribes have had with the river for over 1,000 years. When I consider the history of Whanganui claim for the river, it has always essentially been about the same ancient edict of our old people. Kaua kai kōrero mō te awa, kōrero ki te awa. Do not merely speak of the river but address it directly. In March 2017, legislation was passed in the New Zealand House of Representatives that supported at law tupua te kaua, the innate values of the Whanganui River, as understood by the indigenous peoples of this river. The result of the negotiations with the New Zealand government was to accord the Whanganui River the status of legal person. The Whanganui River is now known as Te Awa Tupua. We think it's really important to understand that legal personhood is really only the vehicle for carrying the fundamental rights of nature. The innate values of Te Awa Tupua have been supported at law through this legal person. So if we take this view of the river, it's from the upper reaches, virgin forest, and the waters are clear and clean. And we're reminded that the river is both a physical as well as spiritual entity. So the first value that is part of the definition of this river now is ko te awa te matapuna o te aura. The river is the source of spiritual and physical sustenance. So we have an emotional attachment with our rivers. We have a spiritual attachment, and all peoples can understand and share that. The second value is indivisibility. E rere kau mai te awa nui mai te Kāui Maunga ki Tangaroa. The great river flows from the mountains to the sea. If we are to address the river's issues, we must address it as a whole. If we are going to address what is best for the river, we must address it in its totality. We can't address it through its compartments. And I use this image because the child in the photograph is my paternal grandmother, and those are the people who adopted and brought her up. They come from other parts of the river, and rather than viewing her as a subset of the whole, they brought her up and treated her as the whole that she is, the whole child that belongs to the whole tribe. And so it's a good example of an Indigenous way of thinking, of viewing somebody as a whole, of being able to view the river as a whole at the same time. And it's from that basis that we start to address those matters and those issues that afflict our river. And so this picture is of the old people who took the claim for our river beginning in the late 1920s. The third value relates to the place that Indigenous peoples have on our river, our tribe's long-standing relationship with the river, which is innate. We are inextricably intertwined and aligned with our river. We are the river and the river is us. So this journey has been a long one, but it's been one based on some fundamental principles. And so if we consider the river as both physical and spiritual, is indivisible, that indivisibility relates also to its Indigenous peoples. That gives us a solid foundation to move on and include the rest of our community in the thinking. And so this next image represents the communities coming together, the Indigenous community, the non-Indigenous community around Te Awa Tupua, this new status for the river. And it speaks of the small and large streams that flow into one another, ngā manga iti, ngā manga nui e ono ono kauana. They flow into one another and form one river. And so really it's a call for all communities to come together under the definition of this new status for the river, this new legal person. So it's an inclusive proposition. Peoples of all identities are included because they use and live with the river. And so they're responsible for it. The paradigm has shifted to Indigenous values, to viewing the river at the centre of our relationship with natural resources, but nonetheless, it speaks of our obligation to work with the river and work for it, fundamentally, and then it can provide for all of us. So really that's it. Those four values, called tupua te kawa, define this new legal person. And it's really the values are the important thing to understand, because those values are the values that we want all communities to adopt. Indigenous values, but ones that are shared in the best interests of our river. And in doing that, we're according our river rights. But we're also stating that fundamentally the ones that need to uphold those rights are all peoples that use and interact with that river, regardless of whether we're Indigenous or non-Indigenous. We fought for 150 years or more to have our Indigenous view recognised at law. The law is a vehicle. The driver are the fundamental values that we express as Indigenous peoples on a daily basis. Tihei mauri ola, ki te hoi au, ki te ao marama. Kia ora.
So that video, Gerard Albert, he is a colleague of mine, and he and I worked with our lawyer through the claim negotiation process. Gerard talked about our catchment, and this picture describes the view of our catchment, the longest navigable river in this country, and from the mountains of the central plateau of the North Island of New Zealand, our river flows to the sea. There are 3 district councils, 1 regional council, and a range of interests who have now come together to work with us on improving the health and well-being of our river. As Gerard described in the film, there has been a long history of our people fighting for the rights of our river way back into the 1800s. There were efforts by our people to have redress actions of the colonial people as they came into New Zealand, and their things that they prioritized for their lives were completely different to the way in which we lived. It is the longest litigated case history in New Zealand, and you can see some significant moments in time were in the early or late 1800s and the early 1900s. This koro here was leading the negotiations for our river before he passed. And he said that our people have sought to preserve our rights We protested and petitioned the Crown. We pursued our claims in numerous courts and tribunals. Such litigation often saw the issues narrowed such that they were almost unrecognisable in our terms in relation to our people. That's Sir Archie Tairoa. So our job was to reconstruct the way in which our people saw the river and our relationship with the river as a part of the process in negotiation with the New Zealand government. We did that, and in 2017, the law was passed. We have numerous requests from all over the world looking to understand what we have achieved in terms of legal personhood for our river. But what I think is really important for other people to understand across the world is that the constitutional arrangements of New Zealand allow for us, for Māori, to bring claims against the Crown in relation to their actions and omissions. It is this process that allowed us to then seek a legal personhood recognition for our river. Our people don't say that we own our rivers, our mountains, or our forests. We have an inalienable relationship and a responsibility to care and protect them. That is the premise for which we sought legal personhood for our awa, to be able to recognise it in its own right and to achieve ultimately improved health and well-being for our awa as primacy. The legal personhood has all the rights and powers and duties and liabilities of a legal person. The rights and powers and duties must be exercised and performed, and the responsibility lies in a station to people that are appointed jointly by the Crown and ourselves to act for the legal status of Te Awa Tupua. However, as Gerard explained, it is the people who live alongside the river who have the prime responsibility for maintaining its health and responsibility. There are 25 acts within the New Zealand government system that must recognise and provide for the legal status of the river now. So it has fundamentally changed the way in which our river is treated and viewed in this country. I want to make sure that I leave enough time for questions, but I will just end my very brief presentation with a couple of pages of photographs that describe some of the impacts. On the headwaters of our river, we have a power scheme that takes the headwaters and other waters of 5 other streams away into another catchment for power generation. We have significant land clearance in the upper reaches, and sediment is one of the primary influences on the health and well-being of the river, and you can see so impacts significantly on the well-being of the river, as shown by this picture down the bottom, where you'll see the mainstream headwaters are clear, but tributaries coming in from the upper catchment, where a lot of the steep hill country is cleared, has been polluted. Today, our relationship, though, is strong. We have an annual journey down the river, preserved just for ourselves. We have schools that learn and uphold our river through songs, through our language. We are restoring our river using seeds sourced from our river, propagated and put back there. So in closing, This has been a long journey and just a little glimpse of time for you to join us in this presentation today, but I think we will learn more from questions. So I'll just open it up now for questions. Tēnā koutou. So we started our negotiations in 2003. The biggest challenge is the fact that Western paradigms are significantly different from Indigenous paradigms. The way in which Western paradigms look at natural resources is often the ability to use them, to discharge to them. They are often historically been a utility, something that you can use, whereas for us, they are our life source. They were our means of food, our means of transport. If our rivers are sick, then so are we. So fundamentally different, our ability to bring those two meeting of minds together was the significant challenge. I think the primary point to that is your responsibility. So you, in seeking to have this provision, you have to have the ability to then give life to it. And we have, through our legislation, achieved those 4 values that Gerard talked about. If you're going to do that for everything, then you would need to design how you're going to uphold your responsibilities. For us, the river is what joins us together. Our old people said, do the river first, as that's what connects us, do the lands later, as they are more individually owned and possessed rather than something that is more collective. So I think there's a time and a place for its application. Absolutely, it is our mantra for our tribe. And we have succession one through our schools. There's a picture there of one of our schools. So our children come and they learn in our language. They also learn about their river and build a relationship to their river in song and in language and in practice. So we've got intergenerational language and learning transmission occurring. And we have other mechanisms like the one of the people on the waka, on the boats. So we have an annual pilgrimage down where our people come together and they journey and they learn a whole range of activities and initiatives are required to ensure that intergenerational transmission of history, knowledge and practice. Yes, so around about the same time as we achieved our legal recognition. Another tribe in the country called Tuhoi achieved legal recognition for the forests that they belong to. And another river in the same location as my tribe that I'm part of as well achieved legal recognition for their river, not the same but similar. And then recently, Mount Taranaki, the people of Mount Taranaki have also achieved legal recognition for their relationship with their mountain. So it is something that now is able to be progressed by other iwi across the country, other tribes. Not at the moment. We have put a lot of effort and energy into building the understanding of what this is, and that continues. So it doesn't have undoing 180 years of action will take, hopefully not that long, but it will take a long time to continue to build the understanding of our communities and our people. But we have already examples of where changing mindsets is occurring, and the biggest challenge is for people to move from being transactional, or I need to talk with you because I want to do something, to actually genuinely, I want to engage with you so we can do this together. So it's building a different way of working and building that understanding. We definitely have recognition of the status. So brand recognition or name recognition of the status has absolutely been achieved. Understanding the nature of that, I think, is going to take longer, but it's our ability to lead, our ability to show others what this means and how it works in practice is really the work that we've been doing, and that work will continue. We've had no other litigations as such, although because the way in which people now have to consider the river when seeking to use natural resources has changed. There are a number of consent processes that have entered into different engagement outside of the court. So it's had some good progress to date. I'll say that with a little slight, yes, obviously, we welcome any exchange, but just know we're really busy people, and we've got a little team at the other end, but we'll do our best to share what our experience is and how this can actually change the way Indigenous people can reshape and use quite transformational practices to improve the way in which our natural resources are supported in their life. We don't have a committee as such. We have a suite of arrangements that we've achieved to uphold what we've done. And the biggest one is that we set the strategy. So we didn't aim to replace what the district councils or the regional councils were responsible for, but we did aim to set the strategy so anybody making decisions in relation to the river must adhere to the strategy. So Te Heke Nā Uru, which references the autumn movement of eels within our river, is the strategy setting. And I think the biggest challenge is just to educate, increase understanding, awareness, provide more good examples for others to follow in real action. And by doing so, you create exemplars. So that's really what the work is at the moment. And also the other challenge is changing governments often create different noise because they set different policy. But we just have to remember what we've achieved and keep going forward, which is what we do.
안녕히 가세요.
Ka kite.